Now you know how to grab, rotate, and scale objects. It's time I showed you how to clone things. Getting Connie to that third platform looks easy enough. There's half a bridge between them, so we can just clone this block to finish it off. Okay, hold L1 and grab the block with R2 to clone it. Let go of L1 to stop cloning, then place the clone by releasing R2 to complete the bridge. That doesn't look quite right. Might need to try something different here. Why don't we rotate the clone? Hold L2 over it, then push the right stick sideways. Well, it's better, but now they don't match. We should probably undo everything with the left directional button and start again. This time, we'll make the arches match up by flipping the clone. Here's how you flip objects. First, hover over the arch and hold L1. Then gently grab the arch with R2 to create a clone. Remember, release L1 once you've made the clone. You have to release it or the next part won't work. Here comes the cool bit. While still holding the arch, click the L3 button on your controller to flip the arch horizontally. That's all there is to it. Now you try. Hold L1 and grab the arch with R2 to clone it. Release L1 and flip the arch horizontally by clicking L3. And don't forget, you can realign the clone while you're holding it by pressing the triangle button. Now, let's see what happens if you click R3. Nice! The arch is flipped vertically instead. We should probably line it up with the first arch now, and release R2 to place it down. Ah! We probably should have flipped it back first. No problem. Just grab it with R2 and flip it again with R3. Time to switch over to play mode and see how things are working. Okay, Connie, we've almost made it to the door. Ah, but she needs to go across and up now. Good thing you already know how to make clones because we're gonna need them. So hold L1 and grab the block with R2 to clone it. Now place that clone a little higher than the original, and you know what? There's a better way, so let's undo that with the left directional button. We're going to try a new technique called repeat cloning. I bet you can already guess what it does. That's right, it lets you make lots of clones at once. Let's give it a go. Hover over the block again, hold L1 and press and hold R2. Release L1 once you've made the clone, and move the block up and along. Don't put it down yet though. This is where you become a cloning expert. Without letting go of the first clone, press the right directional button to create a second one. And, you guessed it, another press will create a third one. In fact, you can just keep pressing right to create more and more clones in a sequence. And if you make too many, no problem. Just press the left directional button to remove any clones you don't want. As you can see, all the clones are spaced evenly, and you can move the whole sequence by simply moving the clone that's on your imp. If you move the clone up, you can create a staircase. As always, put it down by releasing R2. Once the clones are in place, they won't be in a sequence anymore. You'll have to edit each block individually. See the dotted line around them? That's a selection. When you put repeat clones down, they're always selected automatically. That means you can move them as a group. If you only want to move one block, you can deselect the group by pressing circle. If you want to find out more, there's a whole tutorial on selecting and grouping objects. Move on to the next step when you're ready. Let's get back to the staircase. It's looking pretty good, but I have one more thing to show you before you move on. Let's get rid of all the clones we've made by pressing the left directional button a few times. You'll notice all the repeated clones are undone together. Now hover over the first block, hold L1, then grab it to create a new clone. Remember to release L1 once you've made the clone, otherwise the next bit won't work. This time, move the block where you want the last step of the staircase to be. There, right in front of the door. Don't let go of R2 yet though. Instead, press the left directional button and... look at that. You've created a sequence of clones between your imp and the original block. You can keep pressing left to create more steps or right to remove them. Once you're happy with your staircase, let go of R2 to place it in the scene. You can create incredible shapes with repeat cloning, so feel free to experiment. How you position the first clone will affect all the repeated clones. Rotating the clones, for example, will let you build ramps and spirals. And if you scale the clone with the up button, you can create a sequence that increases in size. So try different approaches and see what you can come up with. If the path is clear for Connie, switch over to play mode to test the scene. Get Connie to the final platform, then get her to open the door for Cuthbert. If you feel like you've mastered cloning and flipping, walk Connie through the door to complete the tutorial. Good work.
Look at that, when I don't cheat, it actually works.
Welcome to part 4 of our Start Dreaming tutorials. Ah, I see Cuthbert has managed to get himself in a pickle again. Connie, how do you put up with him? What a spanner. But with Connie's help, we can rescue him. This time around, I'll show you how to select and group your creations and how to scope in and out of groups. Luckily, someone left behind a block for us to use. Remember how to repeat clone blocks to create a bridge? Well, let's do that again. Move your view side on to the block and the gap. Hold L1, then grab the block with R2. Move it with the motion sensor function to create a clone. Just like last time, let go of L1 while still holding R2, then press the directional buttons to make more clones. If you rotate the first block a little before you clone it, you can make an arch. Use L2 to make the first block angle up slightly, then make the clone angle down. Press the left directional button to repeat clone, and the clones will line up to make an arch.
Oh,
Amazing,
so...
right?
Hold on.
Let's quickly test that in play mode.
Shake your face.
Looks great. Switch back to edit mode, rewind time, and go to the next step of the tutorial.
The fuck is wrong? Oh my god. What the Dude, what the fuck is going on? Oh my sweet mother lord. Oh, I see what happened. I'm retarded. What happened? Wow, bro. Damn, this kid is so cool. I just need a bridge.
Now, you probably noticed that all the blocks, the original as well as its clones, were selected automatically after cloning. You can tell when things are selected because they have an animated dashed outline. But after we switched between play and edit modes, everything was deselected. So let's select them again. All you have to do is hover your imp over one of the blocks and press X. There's the outline again. Now do the same to the rest until the whole bridge is selected. Can you see how each block has its own outline, with a double line where they meet? That's because they're still individual elements. You can deselect them one at a time with X, but it's much quicker if you deselect them all at once with circle. Give it a try. There's also a faster way of selecting multiple objects. Just select one as before, but this time keep X held down. Now move your imp to select the others. Better than selecting one at a time, right? So much faster. The great thing about having multiple objects selected is that you can manipulate them as if they were one object. For example, if all the blocks are selected, you can clone the bridge sideways to create a double bridge. Plenty of room for Connie to cross it without falling off the edge. Try it in play mode. Once Connie is across the gap, go back to edit mode and move on to the next step. You know, this bridge would be really useful to help Connie cross to the next platform. Use X to select all the blocks again. If we're going to use this bridge a lot, we can make it into a group. That way, it will behave like a single element and you won't have to keep selecting all the blocks. Have you noticed the menu at the side of the screen? It appears when you have one or more objects selected. That's the context menu. The options it gives you will depend on the situation you're in. In this case, all the buttons relate to selected objects. Look for the plus sign. That's the icon for the group button. The number next to it tells you how many objects you've selected. You can use this button now to turn all of those blocks into a group. There we go. The bridge is now a single element. You can tell because it has one outline around it instead of one around each block. And if you look over at the context menu, you'll see the group button now says ungroup. Use it if you want to break a group up. But we still need it to help Connie. So let's clone this bridge and place it between the second and third platforms. Just like before, hold L1 and grab the bridge with R2 to clone it. As always, remember to let go of L1. Ah, we don't need to test the bridge to see that it's not going to get Connie to the third platform. But don't worry, we'll fix that in the next step when you're ready to move on. Our bridge needs a bit of work if it's going to reach the next platform. This is the perfect opportunity to learn a new technique, scoping in. Scoping in means you can jump into a group and edit the contents individually without having to ungroup it first. And since you can only edit things inside the group, you don't have to worry about messing up anything outside it. Let's give it a try now. Select the bridge with X if it isn't already selected. Then find the Scope In button near the bottom of the context menu. Notice that it's showing you a shortcut for it, L1 and X. So hover over the bridge group, hold L1 and press X. Now you're scoped in. We can now edit all the parts as if it wasn't a group. If you want to really focus on just the group, you can hide everything else in the scene. Just use the Hide Everything Else button in the context menu. The icon looks like a closed eye. There's also a Scope Out button in the top right corner. This is how you exit groups. Try scoping out now. Select the button with X or use the shortcut, L1 and circle. That's it. Now scope back in again so we can fix the bridge. Just hover over it, hold L1 and press X. I think what Connie needs to reach the next platform is a staircase. So use the move and clone tools to create a new one. Once you've built the staircase, test it out in play mode to make sure Connie can make it across. When you're happy with it, switch back to edit mode, rewind time, and move on to the final step of this tutorial. Is your staircase working? Fantastic. Now Connie just needs a bit more help to save poor old Cuthbert from his predicament. Luckily, you can clone your staircase group to reach the final platform. Use the clone shortcut L1 and R2 to copy the staircase group to the last platform. Don't forget to let go of L1 once the clone has been created. That's how useful groups are. If you select the group, you'll see a button in the context menu that saves the group as a new element. Saving a group as a new element means you can use it in other scenes or share it in the Dreamiverse. You can't do that in tutorials, but you can everywhere else. Now that you've mastered selecting and grouping, I'll leave you with a thought to ponder. You can also make a group inside a group. With that, I'll let you experiment. Once you're happy that you've mastered selecting, grouping and scoping, you have just one thing left to do. Go into play mode and take Connie and Cuthbert to the exit. Are you ready to get those creative juices flowing? This tutorial's all about making your creations beautiful. Now, this is Connie's front garden. But what's this? It's had all the colour, style and magic sucked out of it. But not to worry, Connie. We can help make the garden pretty again with the power of dreams. Just to start you off, all the lighting's already done. We can learn more about that later. And because I'm ever your servant, I've also grouped some of these objects just for you. It'll make editing them quicker and easier. So what does the garden need? Well, it could do with some colour, texture, and movement. Luckily, the coat, style, and effects modes are the perfect tools to do that. They don't create new objects. They modify existing sculptures and paintings. And they work on groups. With just a little practice, you can become a master of them all. So let's start by adding some colour with the tint tool. Open the assembly menu with the square button and go to the modes menu. Each mode has its own set of tools and options. The tint tool is in coat mode. It has an icon that looks like a pot of paint being spilled. Select it by pressing the X button. As you can see, the assembly menu has now been replaced with the coat menu. In the top row, you'll find options and helpers. Along the bottom, you'll find the tools. Now, which color to use? Open the colors menu in the top row of icons. These are color groups. You can expand a color group with X. Each group contains more shades that you can choose from. I'm going to find a green for the foliage, but if green's not your thing, you can experiment. Is the menu too long? You can scroll it by grabbing it with R2. Pick a shade, or if you fancy a more painterly or organic look, choose the tumbler color at the end of the group. That will apply a random shade that changes as you work. When you've chosen a color, you're ready to go to the next step. To add color to our scene, we'll use the Tint tool, which has an icon like an airbrush. You can manually select it in the Tools menu. But in Coat mode, choosing a color from the Colors menu equips the Tint tool automatically. See the airbrush icon on the tip of your imp. The Tint tool recolors objects, either tinting or completely covering their original color. Just press and hold R2 to tint the objects at the tip of your imp. No need to select or scope into anything. The rounded clumps look a bit dreary in this scene. Let's add some color. You can see that the longer you hold R2, the stronger the tint gets. And with a tumbler color selected, it will cycle through different shades. If you make a mistake, you can undo using the left directional button. Or set your tool to subtract and you can detint. How do you do that? If you press triangle while the tool is active, your imp will change to an outline. So now it will remove tint instead of adding it. And that works on pretty much all of the coat, style, and effects tools. Just press triangle when they're equipped to make them subtractive. Try removing some color using subtractive tint now. Just hold R2 over the object. And to make the tool additive again, press triangle. Now that you've got to grips with that, you can color in the whole scene with the Tint tool. Go wild. Use different colors to tint the path, rocks, river, grass, trees, and the little cottage. The colors menu has all the colors you need. Just open a color group and pick a shade, or the tumbler color. Take some time to color your scene. When you're done, move on to the next step. Good job. Now your scene is beautifully coloured in, let's add some texture to it. For that, we need to leave coat mode and go into style mode. To leave a mode, select the exit button in the top right of the screen. Or you can use a shortcut. Hold L1 and press circle. Just like scoping out of a group. Now use the Modes menu to switch over to Style mode. The Style mode icon is an S-shaped brushstroke. All sculptures and paintings in Dreams are made up of flecks, and Style mode is where we manipulate them. For example, notice how the objects in this scene look smooth? That's because their flecks are small and tightly packed together. We can make them more textured with the Looseness tool. Select the Looseness tool. It looks like a blurry circle. Now try using R2 to loosen some of the foliage in the scene. Don't hold back. As you can see, loosening sculptures and paintings means their flecks become more obvious. If you think they're getting too loose, press triangle to make the tool subtractive and tighten them up again with R2. Or you can just use the left directional button to undo. Don't forget to loosen up the river too. We'll need it in the following steps. Carry on loosening the objects in the scene. When you're happy, proceed to the next step. Wonderful. Connie's garden looks like a lovely painting. Let's look at the water now. Water has a reflective quality, so let's add some shine to the river. This is where the Finish tool comes in. Exit out of Style mode with L1 and circle and head back into Coat mode in the Modes menu. Next to the Colors menu in Coat mode, you'll find the Finishes menu. Select it with X. These finishes change the way objects react to light in your scene. Using finishes, you can make objects shiny, rough, metallic, or even translucent. Using finish, select it with X. Select it with X. Exit out of Style mode with L1 and circle and head back into Coat mode in the Modes menu. Next to the Colors menu in Coat Mode, you'll find the Finishes menu. Select it with X. These finishes change the way objects react to light in your scene. Using finishes, you can make objects shiny, rough, metallic, or even translucent. Now you can choose your finish for the river. Let's see. Ah, yes. How about shiny wax? Wax finishes are translucent, and the shine will give the river a reflective surface that will catch the light. Apply the finish as before using R2. Remember that you can revert your changes by switching to subtractive mode with triangle, or by using undo. Try editing the finish on other groups and objects in the scene. Continue to the next step when you're ready. Our river looks nice and shiny now, but something's missing. It doesn't flow like water does. But there's a magical tool for that in effects mode. It's called the Flow tool. Leave Coat Mode if you haven't already, and enter effects mode. The effects mode icon has some twinkly stars on it. Alongside the Flow tool, you'll notice other animated effects that you can apply to sculptures or paintings. But for now, we'll pick the Flow tool. Its icon is a tap, or a faucet if you're from the US. Press X over the Flow tool to select it, and use R2 to apply it to the river. Isn't that lovely? In effects mode, you can preview the flow effect even when time is paused. But if you leave effects mode, you'll need to click R3 to see the effects in action. When the river's flowing at the right speed, you may notice something a bit odd. It's flowing the wrong way. Let's fix that using another tool found in Style mode, the Comb tool. Leave effects mode using L1 and circle, then go back into Style mode via the Modes menu. The Comb tool icon is some wavy lines. Select it with X. Now we're going to make the river flow the correct way. How do we do that? You guessed it. Hold R2 to comb the flecks of the river so they go in the right direction. We're no longer in effects mode, so we can't see the flow effect animating. But just click R3 to start time, and you'll be able to see it again. The key is to move your imp in the direction you'd like the flecks to flow. A bit like you're combing the river's hair. Very stylish. Let go of R2 when you're happy with the flow direction. And now you can see the river is going the correct way. But if it isn't, just undo and try again. When you're happy with the speed and direction of the river, Click L3 to rewind time. Then it's off to the next step. This scene is really coming together. Next, let's do something interesting with the chimney smoke. Move closer to the smoke so you can see the flecks clearly. These flecks don't look very smoky, do they? Let's change that. If you're not already in Style Mode, head there now using the Modes menu. Open the Flex menu with X. It's the button in the center of the top row. Now choose a fleck that looks smoky. How about the dots fleck? When you choose a fleck type, it'll automatically select the Apply Fleck tool. Now, hover your imp over the smoke and hold R2. The flecks will change. That's better. Let's inspect it now using the grab cam. Grab it with R1. And while you're grabbing, spin around it with the left or right stick. The paint strokes look a bit flat, don't they? You can only see them well from certain angles. We can make it a bit more billowy and three-dimensional using the Impasto tool. In the Style menu, select the Impasto tool, then hold R2 to apply it to the smoke. Watch as the individual flecks of the painting become more three-dimensional. To see it better, use the grab cam to spin around the smoke again. You can also press undo and redo to compare the smoke with and without Impasto. Now that you've mastered Impasto, the last style tool we're going to use is the Ruffle tool. The Ruffle tool icon looks like a lot of lines going in different directions.
I already did that.
It will randomly rotate the flecks so they're not as orderly. It works in the same way as the other two tools. Select it with X, then use R2 to apply it. And switch the tool to subtractive by pressing triangle. Ruffle makes quite a difference, doesn't it? Why not see if you can animate the smoke using the flow tool in effects mode?
Evaporate.
When you're happy, go to the next step of the tutorial. Now that the scene is looking good, we should make Connie's cottage look more welcoming for her. We can do that using something called the Glow tool. So head back to the Modes menu and into Coat mode. The Glow tool has an icon that looks like a little sun. Select it with X. Then move your view over to the cottage for a closer look. Now position your view so that you can see the door and the window of the cottage. Then hold R2 over the window in the door to make it glow. Go on, give it some welly. Whoa, that's too bright. Let's press triangle to make the tool subtractive. Then use R2 to reduce the glow. Maybe you could try tinting the window to change the color of the light. See what you think. Have a play with the Glow tool, and then move on to the next step when you're ready. The scene looks so alive now, and Connie's in love with her new home. It's hard to believe that this scene used to be all grey and blocky. Let's try something. How different did we actually make it? To see, we can use a special trick. Press square to open the menu, and then take a look in the Show Hide section. The Show Hide icon looks like an open eye. It can be found in most of the mode's menus. In the Show Hide menu, you can make all sorts of different objects visible or invisible. It only works in edit mode, so your scene will still look the same in play mode. Some of them are on by default, and some are switched off. Coat, Style and Effects is one of the options which is on by default. Its icon is a combination of the icons for all three of those modes. Try turning it off by pressing X over it. Wow, what an amazing difference. That shows you how powerful these tools really are. Using Coat, Style and Effects, you can make even the most boring block come alive. Practice using the tools and see what you can come up with. When you're finished, go to Play Mode in the Options menu and walk Connie into her beautiful new home. This will complete the tutorial.
Welcome to Zane.
It looks like Cuthbert is in a spot of bother. Connie needs our help to get across these platforms so she can rescue Cuthbert. So how about we add a little handmade animation to get her there? You don't need to go into play mode to see that Connie won't be able to make this jump. So let's animate that floating ledge down to her using an action recorder. Action recorders are super easy to use. Just stamp one in your scene, and it will record anything you move with the imp. And we mean anything. It'll even record you moving or tweaking gadgets. We'd better get going. Connie's getting really impatient. You know what cones are like. Go to the assembly menu. Press a square button if it's not already open. Then head to the animate menu. The animate icon is a clapperboard. That thing they use in movies before the director says, action. Now you get to be the director, and you can use these tools and gadgets to animate objects. Select the action recorder, the icon with a film strip and a plus sign on it. You'll now have an action recorder gadget on your imp. Stamp it down, somewhere near the floating ledge. A progress bar will appear at the top of the screen, along with a record button on the right. Also, your imp will turn red. This means you're ready to start recording. Don't worry, recording won't start until you begin moving or changing things. When you're ready, grab the floating ledge with R2. Move it slowly towards Connie using the motion sensor function or the sticks. You'll notice that the bar starts to fill, recording your every move. Don't worry, it's not a time limit. The bar fills up as a visual indicator of something being recorded, so take your time. When you let go of R2, the recording will pause. If you move your view or use the grab cam, that won't be recorded. But if you've started time with R3, recording will continue when you let go of R2. That's why it's important to rewind or pause time before recording anything. That way, your action recorder only contains what you put into it. When you've finished recording, select the Stop Recording button in the context menu. Or you can use the shortcut, L1 and circle button to exit the action recorder. Your imp will go back to normal to show that recording has stopped. Click R3 to play back your animation. Handmade animations are always a bit wobbly, but practice makes perfect. Calibrating your imp can help when using the motion sensor function. Just hold your controller in a comfortable position, then hold the Options button for a few seconds. In the next step, I'll show you how to edit a recorded animation. Anything you record is stored in the Action Recorder gadget. If you hover over the floating ledge, the Action Recorder will pulse. Select the Action Recorder with X, and dashed lines will appear on the objects animated with it. It'll also show the animation path. That's this dashed line. If you're not happy with your animation, redoing it is easy. First, rewind time with L3. Then hover over the Action Recorder gadget, hold L1 and press X. Now we can start recording again. Time will appear over the float. Anything you record is stored in the Action Recorder gadget. If you hover over the floating ledge, the Action Recorder will pulse. Select the Action Recorder with X, and dashed lines will appear on the objects animated with it. It'll also show the animation path. That's this dashed line. If you're not happy with your animation, redoing it is easy. First, rewind time with L3. Then hover over the Action Recorder gadget, hold L1 and press X. Now we can start recording again. Select the Retake button in the context menu to replace the old animation. Now you can record a new one. Move the platform so it stops in front of Connie. You can undo actions you perform using the left directional button, but it won't undo any time that has passed. So it's better to use the Retake button to undo animations. Move the floating ledge from the upper platform down to Connie. Don't worry if the animation's too slow or too fast. We can fix that later. Make sure you press the Stop Recording button when you're done. Spend a little time practicing with the Action Recorder. In the next step, I'll show you how to tweak your animation. Another way to edit animations is to tweak them. Hold L1 and press the square button over the Action Recorder gadget to open its tweak menu. Here you can see all the tweaks for the Action Recorder. By default, the playback mode is set to loop, so it plays the animation over and over again. But you can set them to play once, sustain, or to ping pong. Once will play the whole animation just one time. Sustain will play the animation for as long as the Action Recorder has power. If it loses power, it will stop. Then it will continue from that point when it's powered again. Ping pong plays the animation forward once, and then plays it in reverse. Then forward, then backwards, and so on. That sounds like a good option for our floating ledge. Select ping pong with X. Click R3 to start time and play the animation. You can also change the animation speed to make it slower or faster. Grab the slider with X and use your imp to change the speed. If you want to explore more of the Action Recorder tweaks, you can. If you hover over any button for a few seconds, a more info tip will explain what that tweak does. To close the tweak menu, just hold L1 and press the circle button anywhere over it. And of course, you can undo any changes you make by pressing the left directional button. Switch to play mode to test your changes. When you're ready, come back to edit mode and start the next step. Now that Connie's made it up to the higher platform, how will she get back down to the next one? First, rewind time with L3. You probably already know about cloning objects, but do you know that you can clone their animations along with them? I'm sure you remember how to clone, but if not, just hold L1 and grab the ledge you animated with R2. Once you've made the clone, release L1, then move the ledge to the other side and release R2 to place it. Not only did you clone the ledge, but you also cloned its animation. Click R3 to start time. Now we just need to flip it so that it moves in the correct direction. First, make sure you rewind time. Grab the platform with R2. Then click L3 to flip it horizontally. Depending on where you grabbed it, you might have to move it closer to the other platform after flipping. You may also need to realign it with triangle before releasing R2 to put it back down. Now click R3 to start time, and the platforms should move in opposite directions. Both animations are stored in the same action recorder. So if you retake or delete the action recorder, it will affect both animations. Now go into play mode and see if Connie can make it across both gaps. Switch back to edit mode when you're ready to move on. Now let's get Connie to Cuthbert and get them through the door. I've placed a shiny helper cube. Let's call it Cuthbot. That holds up the next platform, but it's not very animated at the moment. To get it to walk back and forth towards the exit, we need to use Record Possession. It allows you to possess puppets and record a performance with them. Open the Assembly menu, then go to the Animate menu. Select Record Possession. It's the button with the sock puppet icon. Your imp can now possess the puppets in the scene. In the context menu, you'll see the count-in button. When this is selected, you'll get a 3-second count-in before recording starts. Press R2 over the Cuthbot to possess the puppet and start the countdown. When the count reaches 0, the possession recorder begins recording. Unlike the action recorder, it records constantly. So time will be recorded even when the cube isn't moving. Walk the Cuthbot around the obstacles to the final platform.
What the fuck is happening?
Pause for a moment, turn around, then walk back to where the Cuthbot started. Starting and ending at the same place will help to make the animation loop smoothly. Press the circle button to depossess. You'll notice that the recording pauses when you depossess. Select Stop Recording in the context menu to exit the possession recorder. Once you've stopped recording, click L3 to rewind time, then R3 to start time, and watch what you've recorded. In the last step, I'll show you how to edit the recorded possession.
God damn it. Move out of my way. Try this again. Come on. Look, show me how to edit it.
You may have noticed a possession recorder gadget has appeared next to the Cuthbot. When you're using Record Possession, this gadget appears the moment you press the Stop Recording button.
Okay.
Select it with X to view the animation path. The Possession Recorder gadget also lets you edit and tweak the animation. Hold L1 and press X over the Possession Recorder to scope in and edit it. Just like the action recorder, you can choose to retake the animation by selecting the button in the context menu. To stop editing the possession recorder, select Stop Recording in the context menu. Or hold L1 and press the circle button to quickly scope out. You can also tweak the possession recorder with L1 and the square button. It has exactly the same options as the action recorder. Experiment with the recorder and the different tweak options. Remember, you can see more info about the tweak settings by hovering over them for a few seconds. Close the tweak menu by pressing L1 and the circle button anywhere over it. Once you're done editing, switch over to play mode to test out the completed scene. Then Connie can navigate to the last platform and help Cuthbert through the door to complete the tutorial. In this tutorial, you're gonna learn all about the exciting world of logic. Pay no attention to Cuthbert. It's not as complicated as it sounds. I promise. Let's check out the scene. See the buttons on the platforms in front of our good friend Connie? They activate the bridges that will take her to the next platform. At least that's what they're supposed to do. To get them working, you'll need to connect them to the gadgets that control them. You can't see gadgets when you're in play mode, but they let you do all sorts of useful things in edit mode. You can tell gadgets apart by their color and icons. Green gadgets are sensors and inputs. This one is what we call a trigger zone. It's one of the more versatile gadgets. It can trigger other gadgets when it detects something in the scene. Like in this case, Connie standing on the button. Hi, Connie. If you select the gadget with X, you'll be able to see its detection zone. That's it, right there above the button. Press the circle button to deselect the trigger zone, and let's look at the next gadget. Pink gadgets are movers and outputs, meaning they make things happen in the scene. This particular gadget is a rotator, and it's connected to the first bridge. Click R3 to start time, and let's see what it does. Well, not a lot right now by the looks of it. That's because the rotator is switched off. You can tell because the gadget is dim at the moment. But if we connect these two gadgets together, we can turn the rotator on using the trigger zone. In the next step, I'll show you how.
I see, man. It's a good tale.
Before we start connecting things, make sure you can see both gadgets. You'll notice they have ports sticking out of their sides. Ports on the left are inputs, and the ones on the right are outputs. Hover over the output port on the trigger zone now. You'll see the word detected appear. That means that when the trigger zone detects something, this output will send a signal. Before it can send that signal to the rotator though, we'll need to connect them with a wire. So hover over the detected output and press R2 or X. You'll notice your imp is now tethered to the port by a wire. Power ports have appeared on the gadgets too. It's these ports that switch gadgets on or off. Okay, drag the wire over to the rotator gadget. Now hover over the power port at the bottom, then press R2 or X. Once the gadgets are connected, the wire will disappear automatically. That way, your scene won't get cluttered. After all, you don't want wires all over the place. You can see the wire again by hovering over either gadget. Okay, time to test that connection out. So let's switch over to play mode in the options menu. That's more like it. Now the trigger zone detects Connie when she stands on the button and activates the rotator on the bridge. As soon as she steps off, the rotator stops working. You can use the button to get the bridge lined up with the platform. Once Connie can make it to the second platform, you can head back to edit mode and move on to the next step. Now that we've connected the rotator, let's take a look at the second platform.
See the yellow gadget on its side?
This gadget isn't a sensor or an output. It's called a microchip. Microchips are used to organize logic in scenes. You can think of them as boxes of gadgets and wires. Let's have a look inside. Hover over this one with your imp. Hold L1 and press X. It's just like scoping into a group of objects. This window is the microchip's canvas. And if these gadgets look familiar, it's because they're two rotators. Each one controls half of this jointed drawbridge. Try to connect the output from the trigger zone to the power ports on the rotators. You can create multiple wires from the same output. Or you can clone wires in the scene by holding L1, then grabbing them with R2. Clone the wire near the rotator to create a new wire from the trigger zone. Once you've connected the trigger zone to the second rotator, switch over to play mode and make sure it's all working. Okay, jumping on the button now will activate the trigger zone and raise the drawbridge so that you can cross over the... Oh, wait a minute. The bridge has dropped down before Connie could cross. That's because the signal to the rotator stopped sending as soon as Connie stepped off the trigger zone. Switch back to edit mode and rewind time with L3. In the next step, I'll show you how to make signals stay on. If we want the bridge to stay up, we'll need to add a gadget between the trigger zone and the rotator to keep it activated. We can do this with a counter. So let's go into the assembly menu. Press square to open it if it's closed. Select the gadgets menu with X. You'll find the counter in the logic and processing section. The gadgets in this menu take an input signal and change it in some way before sending it on. Go ahead and select the counter. Its icon is a tally counter. Now you can see the gadget on your imp. Hover over the microchip and it will snap to the canvas. Press R2 or X to stamp the counter onto the microchip. Then press circle to unequip it. The counter gadget counts up or down whenever it receives a signal through its inputs. By default, it starts its count at 0 and has a target of 1. Once it reaches that target, it sends a constant signal through its counter-full output port. Before we connect it though, let's tidy up the wires connecting the trigger zone to the rotators. Just hover over them and press triangle to delete them. Now press R2 or X over the detected output of the trigger zone to create a new wire. Connect it to the increase count input port on the counter. That's the port with the plus sign icon. Now when the trigger zone is activated, the counter will go up to 1. And, this is the important part, it will stay at 1 even after the trigger zone deactivates. Now hover over the counter-full output port of the counter. This port sends a signal when the counter reaches its target. Create a wire with R2 or X and connect it to one of the rotator's power ports. Then do the same for the other one. Time to switch to play mode and try out our new connections. When you're happy everything's working as it should, return to edit mode and move on to the next step. Just one more bridge for Connie to cross. As you can see, we have another microchip on the platform, so let's open it up. Hover over it with your imp, hold L1 and press X. Okay, looks like we have everything we need here. But Connie's an adventurer, so how about we make this last bridge more challenging? Adding a timer to the logic should get the adrenaline going. Once Connie activates the button, she'll only have a few seconds to cross before the bridge drops back down. Let's head back to the assembly menu. If it isn't already open, press square. Then go into the gadgets section. You'll find the timer in the same place as the counter, the logic and processing section. Its button has a clock face on it. Now go ahead and stamp the timer gadget onto the microchip with R2 or X. Then unequip it from your imp with the circle button. Now let's take a closer look at the timer's inputs and outputs. You can see their names by hovering over the ports. The first input is a start timer port. Once this receives a signal, it will start the clock. The second one is reset timer, which sets the time back to 0. Over on the output side, we have timer finished and timer output. Timer finished sends a signal when the timer reaches the required number. It's set to 5 seconds by default. Timer output is a little more sophisticated. The signal it sends represents the timer's current progress. If, let's say, it's only halfway to its target, the signal it sends will be half strength. So how do we connect this so the bridge only stays up for a few seconds? Well, we need the bridge to be raised while the timer is running. So create a wire on the timer output with R2 or X. Remember how we used the counter on the previous platform? We can use one here too. Just like before, connect the wire to the counter's increase count input. Then connect the counter full output to the rotator's power port. Time to see if it works. Click R3 to test it out. As you can see, since the timer isn't connected to a trigger yet, the clock starts ticking as soon as we play the scene. The bridge goes up, but doesn't drop down when the timer finishes. That can only mean one thing. There's a problem with the logic. If you'd like to figure it out for yourself, feel free to check the gadgets and see what's wrong. Or move on to the next step and we'll go through it together. So let's take a look at why the bridge stayed up after the timer finished instead of going back down. Remember how we used the counter earlier to remember the signal from the trigger zone? Well, now it's remembering the signal from the timer, so we need to make it forget that once the timer finishes. Let's go over to the counter gadget. Hover over the inputs to see their names. This one here is Reset Count. It'll put the counter back to 0, which will turn off the rotator. So all we need to do is connect it to the timer, but to which output? Aha, there we go. We can use the timer finished output. Hover over it and create a wire with R2 or X. Then stretch the wire over to the counter and connect it to the reset count input. But we also need to reset the timer, otherwise the logic will only work once. So let's get another wire from the timer finished output and connect this one to the reset timer input. You'll recognize it by the rewind symbol on it. All we have left to do is to connect the trigger zone to the start timer port so Connie can activate it. Okay, that was a lot of connections. So before we test it out, let's go over the logic we've made. First, Connie activates the trigger zone, which sends a signal to start the timer. Once the clock starts running, the timer output becomes active. This tells the counter to count up. That then turns on the rotator and raises the bridge. Now this is where the really clever stuff kicks in. After 5 seconds, the timer finishes its count, which activates the timer finished output. This in turn resets the counter to 0, cutting the signal to the rotators and lowering the bridge. And let's not forget, it also resets the timer, so the logic can be triggered again if Connie didn't cross the bridge the first time. Isn't logic exhilarating? Take your time digesting all that. Logic is easier to read if you route your wires neatly. Grab wires with X to change their paths. You can also move the gadgets around by grabbing them with R2.